is Okay, Let's Be Real, the show where you show what you know, created to educate, motivate, and inspire. Real people, real conversations, real truth. I'm your host, Myra, and today I'm here with our featured guest, Rhonda Sekhmet Ra. Rhonda, how are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm fine. Okay, first I want to start by letting you know that this call is being recorded for documentation purposes. Do I have your consent?
Yes.
All right, let's get started. Today's topic is racism and oppression. This issue was brought to my attention by our guest today. She is a social activist and a spoken word artist, and I'll just begin by allowing her to read a few lines from her poem entitled Freedom.
Sometimes I don't think any of us understand what it means to be free because we are so used to slavery. If you can't walk down the street in broad daylight without risking your black life, you ain't free. If you have to act like another race to get to a certain place, you ain't free. If you have to work a job you hate just to put food on your family's plate, you ain't free. If you have to beg the corrupt government for food to eat, the same people who made trillions off your ancestors' slavery, you ain't free. If at any time in this nation you can become a working slave to them lock you up for crimes that they made, you ain't free. If your mind is manipulated by the TV and radio and you lost control over your soul, you ain't free. And the truth is, none of us are without freedom. We can only go so far, just as far as the captain will let us go. That's it.
Okay. Wow. Okay, so that's a deep poem. I was still like, is there more? Okay, so and there is more. That's just a portion of the poem, but you write some really, really deep content. I just want to begin our conversation by asking you where all of this started. Was there an actual point in time where something happened that really made you want to full out really like become an activist for this movement?
Well, basically, I've always been interested in racism. My mom was very racially conscious, and so I tried to understand it, but unfortunately, I think that I was miseducated a lot about racism, and in the school system, I think that it was watered down a lot to a point where I thought racism was more about emotions, or that it wasn't as pervasive, it wasn't as strong as it was back in the 1950s. That was kind of the narrative that we were given. So I believed that for a long time, and I studied racism in every class I could take on racism. I took it in undergrad, also in grad school. I studied social work, and the content of social work is heavily focused on oppression, and they go a little bit more into understanding how racism exists in systems. So I understood a little bit better. It wasn't until actually 2014, around the time of the Ferguson protests, that I felt like I really saw what was going on. Those protests led me to doing more research and doing a lot more reflecting that led me to becoming what I call awake and really understanding what's going on. And from there, in terms of my spoken word, I've always written poetry. I've done it since I was a child, but learning about the issues and feeling very strongly about it led me to taking it to another level and to incorporate what I knew about racism and what I felt about racism and putting that into spoken word form.
Wow. You're 26 years old, right?
Yes, correct.
When you were younger, were there things that you saw growing up beyond just hearing it from your mom? Did you see things more than you see things happening now, or do you feel like things have changed throughout the years as far as racism?
I think I saw a lot of things when I was younger, but I interpreted them a lot differently than I interpret them now. I would remember when I was younger times where I was accused of stealing, and of course I wasn't stealing. And, I remember my parents getting really upset with things like that. But I remember, when I was little, I just wanted everybody to get along, and so I didn't really think anything bad of it. I knew that it had to do with racism. I didn't fully understand it. Also, things that would go on in school, I remember feeling what now I would call inferior, but I guess as a child, I would just call it low self-esteem or just feeling bad about myself. And I didn't have any idea that that had to do with racism, but now I understand that it did. And just a lot of things like that happened, but like I said, the interpretation was totally different. I wouldn't say that things have gotten better or worse.
Okay, so here's a really big question that I have. Do you ever see the world progressing and moving forward and ever being completely free?
Yes, and that's what I work for. And I was so happy when I started understanding racism better, because what I've always thought is that we have to end racism, and that's a really big, scary goal. But now, since I understand things a little bit better, my goal is actually liberation and freedom for Black people. And I think that's a lot different, and I think it makes it, I think it actually makes the goal easier, because my goal is just for us to have complete freedom, us not to be in control of any system that's oppressing us, just to be free. And I think that starts psychologically, and I think that also makes it a lot easier to achieve, because it starts in the mind. So once you're able to get free psychologically, then getting free physically makes a lot more sense. And I think it is possible, because, I mean, there's been thousands and thousands and thousands of years in the world where Black people and all people, a lot of people from different races were free, that they didn't live under racism or oppression. And I think it's possible to happen again. I think it's going to take a lot of changing of mindset for a lot of people, but I definitely think it's possible, and that's actually my goal, is for freedom. I don't know if it's going to happen while I'm alive, but that's what I fight for every day.
What is it that you believe people are scared of? The people who are still in this mental trap?
I think the thing that people are most scared of, just in general, is speaking too much about racism, because I think that as a society, we've kind of been taught that talking about racism makes it worse. So when you're talking about it, you're just stirring up these emotions, or, you know, you're making people focus on it. And I think that's just one of the worst things that we've been taught, or that we've come to believe, because when you don't talk about the issue, it doesn't magically go away, just like, you know, with things like domestic violence. If we stop talking about domestic violence, it doesn't just magically go away on its own. We actually have to do something about it. So I think people are scared to talk about it because they don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, and I've experienced that myself, you know, even in grad school. I would not post certain things about racism. I would not say certain things about racism, especially as a Black person, because I was very afraid of what people would say, and including my classmates. And I didn't want to hurt anybody's feelings, or I didn't want to, you know, cause more division. So I wouldn't talk about it. But once I realized, mentally, I woke up and realized that that was kind of putting me in a trap, because not talking about my own oppression was just letting it continue without me doing anything, and also me feeling so constrained from talking about it. Once I realized that, it helped a lot, and it woke me up a lot. Some people are scared because, you know, racism is a big, ugly, scary thing, and there are some big, dangerous people behind it. But I think mostly people are more unaware than afraid at the moment. But I think it's kind of a combination of both. I think fear keeps people from doing a lot of things too. You know, a lot of people are afraid of getting hurt. We've had a lot of leaders that have died, or who have had their lives seriously transformed from trying to work on the progression of Black people. And there's a lot of organizations that have been dismantled. People get spied on and all kinds of crazy stuff. So it's understandable that some people are scared to even participate in this, but I think also if people are unaware that it's even an issue, or how big of an issue it is, then we can't even get to addressing the fear part.
Well, what about the notion of not being able to control other people, but only being able to have full control over your own actions? I don't want to consider myself mute about this issue, but I'm kind of like hesitant myself to get all actively involved in something like this, because it is a touchy subject. I have so many affiliates from different paths and different cultures, and especially if you're from New York, or if you've ever lived there, or if you know people there, you know that's one of the main cities in this country where it's very diverse and fused, and you have to be around people of different cultures. And it's very tough to be racist when you are kind of forced to be in an area where there are so many different people, and you have to be exposed to it. and eventually you kind of get used to it. I feel like it's those people who purposely estrange themselves from that, who want to be isolated. They choose to be isolated for whatever reason, and it's not something that anyone can change until that person themselves decide to become open. Do you agree with that? That the person themselves have to become open? It's not something that, like, if they're watching the news and they see like the Million Man March or something like that, and that they will be like, oh my God, look how many people feel so strongly about it. Let me change my mind. Like, it's something that something has to happen to them. What is it that you feel like has to happen to these people individually for them to change, the people who are stuck in that mental trap?
Right. I completely agree with you in terms of, we have control over ourselves. We don't necessarily have control over other people. But I think that there are ways to lead people to coming to their own understanding, which is difficult to do. The organization that I'm a part of, the Black Awakening Movement, it does so in an organized way, because as an individual, it's very hard to change someone else's beliefs. And even if you have all the right tools and all the right strategies, you still may not be able to do it. I mean, leaders like Martin Luther King, any of us can hear a speech by him, and we have to be moved. But there were a lot of people that weren't moved. There were a lot of people that hated Martin Luther King for what he was saying, including Black people. They didn't want to work for each other. They wanted to live in their comfortable life. So I completely agree that our control is completely over ourselves. But I think that's also such a great philosophy for us to have, especially as oppressed people, to learn how to have control over yourself again. Because a lot of us have lost that. We have become dependent, we have become complacent, we feel like we don't have any power. So regaining that power through knowledge, through understanding, it's a really powerful thing. It's really changed my life, coming into understanding the power more. And I just remember when I had that awakening and I started meeting more people who a lot of people would call conscious people, people who are more aware of the issue than the average population. I started meeting all these people. I'm like, wow, where have these people been all my life? Why haven't any of these people ever come to me and try to explain to me what was going on? Because I've been looking for this information. I've been looking for someone to tell me how things really are. I've been wanting to know about, my history as a Black person, knowing about all these great African civilizations and all these things that I didn't know before. And I'm like, why didn't anybody ever come to me with this information? So that's another reason why I work so hard to try to send a message to people, because I didn't have anybody to send that message to me. I think it's important for us, even if we don't reach everybody, to at least try to give people the information, even if they're not ready to receive it, we can plant a seed. And it may be information that may not help that person want to fight for freedom, but it may make them feel better as a person. And I think that's great in itself. Really, everybody has a different role they can play. A teacher teaches, and that can be a very powerful thing if they're doing it the right way. Mothers can teach their children properly about their history and give them a lot of self-esteem. People like you who do radio shows can, help to really bring some awareness to the population and really give them insight. So there's something that everybody can do. It's just not going to be done in the same way. But I think you're absolutely right, is that we have to start by realizing what we can do and what control we have over our own self, and start there before we try to go anywhere else, definitely.
Well, taking it all the way back, I like to look at the root of issues whenever I talk about issues that are this deep, that have blown out of proportion. Like you said in your poem, 4 centuries, 40 decades, 400 years, and you tell me the struggle is over. That's right. Like, that's so true. Like, the years go by. Like, time doesn't wait for anybody. And if nothing happens to change what's wrong, like, it will continue to be wrong. Like, there's no way you can sweep something under the rug and then expect for it to just magically disappear. Like, it's still there. It's still there. It's just hidden, and hidden under a rug. So, what I want to do is try to get to the root of this whole issue. Where do you believe that slavery, the whole mentality of slavery and making, I guess, African American culture seem different, where did that ideology begin?
The general understanding of racism, what I've read and what I've studied, is that around the time that slavery was beginning, a lot of it was done for economic reasons, but at the same time there was a philosophy being created that was trying to prove that white people were superior to black people, and that helped to give a justification for this new economic system that was coming about that was obviously extremely inhumane. But I think whenever people do things that are wrong and they know that they are wrong, they have to find some justification for it so that they don't feel as bad doing it, and they feel like they have a right to do it. Just like when Europeans came and conquered America, they had to say that the Native Americans were savage and things like that so that they wouldn't feel as bad and, massacring them. They would say it was manifest destiny, they had a purpose in doing it and things like that. So I think the same thing with racism against black people is it was created to justify what they were doing. And I think that it was done so well because it wasn't just done like, one person said, black people are inferior. There was research done and people would analyze skulls and body parts and all kinds of things to try to prove, even scientifically, that black people were inferior, to the point that some people today still think that black people have less intelligence, less morality, and some people will try to prove it scientifically to this day. I think it started with that and just a lot of reasons and a lot of justifications for something that was obviously wrong, but this method of justifying it obviously worked really well because this was a system, like we were just saying, it was maintained for centuries, still going on in a lot of ways. So I think it starts there is people creating a justification for doing something that is extremely wrong. And I don't want to generalize it so much to say that that's exactly what racism is in a nutshell. That's everything about it. Because there are a lot of things that happened before and after that. There were a lot of interactions with Europeans and Africans before that were really significant and still impact us today. But I think, at that time, the idea of race wasn't familiar to us, because somebody had to create these classifications of white and black and other and all those things in between. It started with a justification for something that was obviously wrong.
Do you feel like also it had something to do with just that point in time where a certain group of people happened to have the upper hand at that time? Because around the time when slavery started in the United States, it was a lot of the beginnings of everything. Like, it was a lot of unsteady ground in several situations with the economy, with the government, with who owns what with land and everything. And just people trying to get established. And there was a lot of wars, like unnecessary wars beyond just race. It was just like people were just finding any and every kind of reason to be aggressive about things. I mean, in other countries too, traveling here and us going there. And it was a lot of people figuring things out. So I don't know, in my mind, I feel like the roots of all this started accidentally. Like, it was based on nothing at all that made sense whatsoever. It was just based on the time, issues at the moment, and who had the upper hand. Because the pictures that I've seen in the history books, and that's just what they chose to put in the history books. Like, there are so many things that I'm sure that you know that weren't put in the history books. But the slave ship pictures and things, paintings and art that was done, that showed how they were like stuffed into crates and just stuffed into ships like animals and brought over to America from Africa. African Americans were treated like animals, like beneath animals, almost like nothing. And it was all, I feel like it was all based on who had the upper hand, because you only allow yourself to be treated in a certain way, like if you don't have any other means of fighting back. You will fight back if you have the tools, but if you don't, you can't. So it was something where maybe it was the numbers. There were more of the Europeans or whoever it was that came up with this whole idea. There were more as far as numbers. They had more ammunition. They had more manpower. So they targeted a culture and a group of people who did not have that. So it was kind of like a weak move, you know, but it was something that, it's like playing a game. It's like when you're playing chess or something like that. It's whoever happens to be in the right spot at the right moment, and, you know, you move your game pieces and you get to the other side of the board and you win the game. Like, it's all about strategy and timing and being in the right place at the right time. It's all about numbers. And it's also, you know, it's just, I feel like this whole slavery issue with the African American culture, anytime you go through a struggle that deep, even this far out from it, from when it initially started, it gives you strength. Because like the saying goes, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, even though a lot of people did die along the struggle and along the journey. But, you know, the people who are still here today, and like your, I don't know, grandmother, and as far back as it goes in your family, like your relatives who lived through the civil rights movement, and the people who can tell you about the civil rights movement, whatever is passed on to you, you have the power to pass on to future generations and the power to change the mindset of future generations. You can only be brought up from that. So, I mean, I see it as a bittersweet kind of concept, bitter, you know, with the whole obvious, you know, struggle, but good. It's good in a way that we can use that as our power, because it gives us a reason. And this is really something that I really feel deeply about. We have a reason to do better. We have no reason to not do better. Like, we have every reason to do better for ourselves. You said something about how you get paid for being derogatory, or something about being a prophet. Can you quote the correct line?
I don't give a damn about the money if I have to be subservient, sing and dance to promote their agenda. That you out here calling your brother nigga and you said the bitch, make you think you ain't never gonna be shit but a drug dealer, athlete, inmate, a rapper. This is the trapper, the trapper. You make money just to give it back to your oppressor who uses your fresh shoes. You got that thing every new day. Move this away from my content and convinced that something's wrong with it as they took for a premise home, which is what you're over here seeing about bitches to get a fraction of the profit. You could be the prophet. A lot of that is focused on the music industry, where you do sing in order to produce music that promotes certain stereotypes, and then from that we only get a fraction of the profit from the people who actually own these labels, and at the same time we're being used. The money that we're getting is only a fraction of what they're getting, so they're really getting a lot off of our energy and off of our struggle. So that's kind of basically what that part is about. Or I should say a lack of mainstream musicians using their music in order to send positive messages, because there are a lot of musicians sending positive messages. They're just not in the mainstream and they're just not on the radio and things like that.
I went to school for music industry studies, and at one point I did spoken word also, and then I went into rapping, and all my raps and everything were very angry. And I realized that when I write the most and the best is when I'm angry, and when there's an actual reason and a focus and a goal, a clear goal, or something is wrong and I know that it's wrong, like it needs to be changed.
But when I change things, trying to fix them, it complicates things more than if I diss them. Then I miss them. Then again, I forget them. When my pen hits the pad, I make everybody listen. I told you, my attitude is a problem. I got problems. Can't solve them. Can you solve them? Can you resolve them? Hold up, you were the one who caused them.
And all my poetry and everything was about changing the community and people dying and struggle and everything.
Giving me the hardest time. Is it better? Is it worse? A blessing or a curse? Does it always have to hurt? If so, you go first. You go first. Look at us, all different for a reason. The only thing we share is the air we're breathing. Judged by my appearance, what everyone is seeing. If they don't like the look of it, I'm judged without a hearing. How can we adequately decipher what we think but don't know? I think it's so stereotypical. We as a people have so many flaws, it's countless. We should stop by counting our own, not someone else's. I have seen with my eyes the stupidity of lies, the hypocrisy of hate is an unfortunate debate. SMH, why do our highs and lows depend on social yeses and nos? We always stick our nose in someone else's rose to see how it smells, and if it doesn't smell well, we're the first to tell, we're the first to blame, we're the first to point fingers and call names, when we're the first ones who asked for it in the first place. Looking for some dirt to dish, we drop the first plate. Always got.
And then after I would write these poems, or even after I would perform the poem and people would clap and everything, and I would just go home and think about it, I would always just be like, okay, so what now? Like I wrote this poem, but how many people are going to hear it, and how do I make people actually do these things? Like, and I'll turn on the news and it'll just be like all these murders and people dying, and I'm just like, oh no, like it's never going to stop. And I just feel like it's just, people are just angry and need to heal first. Like, I feel like people know that there are so many issues going on. We know it. We see it. You can't help but to see it. Like, it's everywhere. They know. Everybody knows that racism still exists and that oppression still exists. It's just that we have our own other issues with ourselves that we're trying to fix, like, one by one, and it's hard to prioritize because it's so many different issues. So many issues. Like, this podcast that I'm doing is open to every issue, and I can only imagine what topics are going to be covered because it's really so many issues. So it's not really, it's kind of like looking for work, right? So you might be good at something, but it's not that you're not good at something. It's just that there are so many other people who are also good at the same things, and it's just so much. It's so many people. Like, the population is so big now that it's overcrowded. It's too much of everything, and it's chaotic.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's talk about the Baltimore protests. I'm just going to read a little excerpt from Wikipedia. It says, on April 12, 2015, Baltimore Police Department officers arrested Freddie Gray, a 25-year-old African-American resident of Baltimore, Maryland. Apparently in good health at the time of his arrest, Gray sustained injuries to his neck and spine while in transport in a police vehicle. On April 18, 2015, after Gray's subsequent coma, the residents of Baltimore protested in front of the Western District Police Station. Gray died the following day, April 19, 2015, a week after his arrest. So then it says spontaneous protests started after the funeral service, although several included violent elements, and civil unrest continued with at least 20 police officers injured, at least 250 people arrested, 285 to 350 businesses damaged, 150 vehicle fires, 60 structure fires, 27 drugstores looted, thousands of police and Maryland Army National Guard troops deployed, and with a state of emergency declared in the city limits of Baltimore. Yeah, I am so overwhelmed by, like, all the protests, the riots, the bombings, everything. I don't really even keep up with the news anymore. Like, it's like I don't want to even be, like, a part of it anymore. But at the same time, I wanted to change. I just don't know how to change without appearing crazy and militant and violent. Like, you get involved in a riot and you're trying to speak up for something that's just, and then next thing you know, you have all these numbers, like they said, all these people arrested, people dying, and people going ham basically all through the city, and it just erupts into violence. Like, do you believe that's what people are scared of? Like, that's what the officers and everything and the media are typically, like, afraid of when things like this happen?
Well, I think with the media, it's really difficult, and I have a difficult time seeing things from the perspective of the media because it's another thing that's used to manipulate people a lot of times. And a lot of times real issues are presented, but they're presented in a certain way with a certain narrative. You know, just for instance, I mean, there's been riots where people don't usually get scared when they hear about a riot from sports, even though people are burning cars and things like that. But when it comes to black people, people have fear, and, you know, a lot of reason is because, of course, the stereotype that black people are dangerous, violent. And then on top of that, we have an issue that's been going on for centuries where black people have been mistreated and oppressed for hundreds of years, and they haven't done anything yet. So I think in the back of everyone's mind, they're like, oh, you know, one day these people are just going to erupt and do something crazy. And in a sense, that's a little bit of what's happening. People, you know, when you're seeing the injustice over and over again, especially young people, because that's what primarily in these riots are, very young people. When you're seeing this going on over and over again, and you just get fed up with it, you know, eventually you explode in some way, you know, just like if somebody's punching you over and over again and you're not doing nothing. Eventually you're probably going to end up hitting the back, you know, that's just a normal reaction. So I think over and over again, just people end up getting fed up, and then, you know, something happens like one of these riots, and then, you know, it's settled down, and it kind of becomes a cycle. And I think Martin Luther King said something, I don't have his exact quote, but he said something along the lines of, you know, I can't condemn the riots without condemning the situation that caused the riots. So I think a lot of people just, when they see those riots, they focus just on the riot and focus on what's going on, but we have to, you know, like you mentioned earlier, get to the root of the problem. And, okay, what's causing this? What's causing the riot? What's leading to this? And Martin Luther King also said riot is the language of the unheard. So I think if these people were heard and they got justice, then these riots wouldn't be happening. And I think a lot of it is just misguided energy. I think that these people, especially these young people, they just really want to do something, and they're fed up. You know, nobody else is doing anything. So their way, it's not very productive, but I think there's a lot of emotion, there's a lot of passion, and I just wish that energy was directed in the right place, because, you know, if these same young people were taken, you know, into some type of organization or some type of formal way in order to attack racism, they'd probably be really great at it. You know, some of the best organizations in history against racism have been led by young people. I think it's just a lot of misguided energy, but, you know, I don't think it's the worst thing. I think, you know, it's very unfortunate, because I think, you know, when those riots happen, businesses are burned and, you know, things are vandalized, things are torn apart. But I think it also sends a message, a very large message, you know, just like with the Ferguson protests, which I think some of those have turned into riots too. It really sent a message, and I think it really brought a lot of awareness that wouldn't have come if people didn't do that. I think it's unfortunate that it has to get to that level. Just like I think, you know, when somebody is killed by police or by other means unjustly, it brings a lot of awareness. It's unfortunate that that's the way that awareness is coming, but I think at least that the positive side of it is bringing a lot of awareness and attention to showing that this is a really bad situation. You know, it's not just a little thing. It's very serious, and we seriously need to do something about it. So that's basically, you know, my take on the riots, and I just wish those kids and the other people involved really had some better direction to do something positive with that energy.
I don't know if it'll ever stop, really. As long as someone is able to get away with something, they're going to do it. So, I mean, I constantly see it. Like, people will just post YouTube clips. Like, there's this guy, he has his little video recorder or whatever, and he's always trying to see what illegal things police officers are doing to people. And these officers will not know how to react when they see that somebody is filming it, because they don't want to do something to them while they're being documented, right? But if they weren't documenting the whole issue, who knows what would happen. So, I mean, this is not just a racial issue, but it's any issue. It's just a human nature thing that if you're in a position where, like, you have the upper hand, like, say you're working under a boss who's just, like, arrogant and owns the company and has your paycheck and everything at his or her disposal or whatever. You know, and then you're working under this person. They can pull the strings, and they have the power to pull the strings. There's nothing you can do about it unless you leave and go somewhere else or start your own initiative. That's human nature, to do whatever you had the power to do because you had the power or the right to do it. I don't want to be like a naysayer or somebody's like, whatever. But I don't want to feel like I have to completely like aggress myself all the time. Like, that takes so much of my energy. I mean, just for a situation to change. I've just accepted it as, not accepted racism, but like accepted this whole injustice issue as the whole thing. Like, my notion is this: be on your A game, have your bases covered, like document things as much as possible. You need evidence. If you're going to prove anything, you need evidence. Like, never be, or try your hardest not to ever be in a position where you don't have documentation for things. The Constitution does everything to you. Like, you can't take away somebody's right to free speech because that's what our nation has been founded on. And so no one can say nothing to you about that if you have that to back you up. Have things to back you up legally that nobody can say anything about. Have your bases covered. Basically, at the end of the day, when it comes to situations like Freddie Gray and Ferguson and everything, some people are just ignorant. Like, you can't change that, and it's just unfortunate how some people can, wear their badge or whatever and feel all of a sudden like they have this authority when they still had the same mindset of someone else without a badge. We can't really decipher that all the time just by physically looking at someone's mentality. It's just something that we can't always get to. We don't always know what somebody is thinking, what their mentality is, and how far they're going to take something. As far as like shooting an innocent, African American, like, young person who wasn't even really trying to do something, just assuming things, something like that, like, that's a whole nother topic, basically, to me, the whole topic of ignorance. And I just kind of just want to summarize all of this and just end our conversation on talking about current African American behavior, the whole stereotypical being black. What's your perspective on what that means? Like, for me, I watch court shows a lot. Like, I'm really into understanding both sides of the story, like trying to understand why people do things. And I'll watch like these court shows, and I'll every now and then see like, two black people on there, and they're just like clearly from the hood, and they're just throwing out all these ebonics and stuff, and the judge is like not black, and it's always this awkwardness every time a word comes out that just throws the whole energy off. Every time one of those slang words come out, and I'm just like, speak proper. Like, I'm just like, speak proper. It's definitely a stigma attached to it, being black. Like you said in your poem, you said, if you have to act like another race to get to a certain place, you ain't free. What's your take on that? Because I do feel that way. I do feel like there is a stigma to being black. Like, you have to be a certain way for people to accept you and to hear you when you're communicating.
Well, I think there's a lot of different things to that. One of the things is that we as black people have been taken away from our original culture in a way that I can't think of any other example in history where people have so drastically been taken away from their culture. Usually people do it by choice or assimilation that's not forced. But with that, it was forced, so we were completely taken away from what we identify from a culture. So now we're kind of in America with this whole pseudo-culture. So it's kind of like either, we're trying to be like the dominant society, or we're trying to play into these stereotypes. Along with that, there's been a lot of psychological oppression, which I think is one of the most impactful forms of oppression. One, we kind of bought into the stereotypes about ourselves. So some people actually practice them or they believe them about other black people. And also, the trauma, just what we've been dealing with centuries has caused a lot of psychological problems with us. I don't think collectively we we've ever done anything to heal from that. I mean, there's a lot of people who haven't even done anything individually to heal from that. Mm-hmm. So it comes out in a lot of ways. And I think also the media does an incredible job of promoting stereotypes and finding people who practice stereotypical behavior. Yeah. And those people a lot of times are presented. Because I think a lot of times when I have conversations with people about how Black people typically act, I'm not talking to a person who acts like the quote-unquote typical Black person. I never am. Yeah. So it's like, where are all these typical Black people? I'm not saying that there aren't any out there. You know, there are definitely people who promote the stereotypes. But I don't think the majority of us do. I think it's just what we see on TV. And then if we see any behavior that goes along with what we see on TV or any other forms of media, then we say, oh, you know, that's how a whole bunch of Black people act. And then there's people who are put in situations where they're taken away from knowledge, understanding, environments that promote their growth. And the easiest thing for them to do is just to play into the stereotype or just say, forgive it all and just do whatever. So I think that's a lot of what we're seeing, and I think the remedy for that is for people to gain what they call a knowledge of self, to understand who they are as a person. And I think it's very important for us to also regain our culture in some way. I know not everybody's on the same page about that, because I think a lot of people believe that we should be striving to be like every other American in the society, but the truth is we're not like every other American in the society. So I think it's a choice. I think the best thing for us is to regain our own culture, our own understanding of things, kind of going back to seeing how we were before slavery. Not saying that we should be just like that, but we have a lot of great civilizations that did a lot of great things, and they also have a lot of great ideas of how we can be, you know, in terms of eating healthy, practicing balance, practicing spirituality, things like that I think are really good for us. I know myself personally, I spent the majority of my life trying to be like the dominant society, trying to fit into a role that they wanted me to fit into. I would speak proper. I would only do things in a certain way. I would do my best not to play into the stereotype. And now that I'm more aware, I realize how much pain that caused me. I wasn't aware of it at all in the situation. I just actually thought I had it good. But now I'm realizing that I wasn't myself. And there's this great article, and I really wish I could give you the name of it, but I'll have to go back and find it, where they kind of talk about a Black person's double consciousness. So it's like we have to see how the dominant society wants us to be, but then we also have to, you know, have our own consciousness. So it's kind of like we're being two different people, and we're not really being ourselves all the time. Like, yeah. I'm sure the majority of people, the way that they act at work is not how they act at home. Especially Black people. I know for me it was like a dramatic difference. And you know, that kind of changed over time, but definitely it's just like, I felt like I have to be this way in front of white people, especially in my profession, which is, you know, risking my livelihood. And I didn't realize like a lot of other people thought that way until I started reading more stuff and getting a better understanding of it. But I think there's just a struggle so much to be like the dominant society, but at the end, we only get some gain from that. You know, we don't get freedom from that. You know, we may have an easier time at work, or we may, you know, get promotions and things like that. But I think in terms of our psychological well-being and balance and healing and healthiness, it doesn't do a lot for that. And so I think it's important, like I said, I think it's good for us to kind of get a sense of our own culture. But I think for people who don't want to do that or don't see that as necessary, I think it's just good to kind of just start being comfortable again, you know, saying what we want to say and being who we want to be, and then not having to be like, oh, we have to talk this way or do this way, you know. I think it's important for everybody to get a good education and, you know, things like that. But I think if you work on yourself, you know, in terms of educating yourself, in terms of doing your healing, in terms of having psychological well-being and all those things, I think that's how you will be a good person, and I think that's how you can be productive to yourself and to society, is by doing that internal work. But I don't think we have to be a certain way or have a certain image. I think that we should just, you know, be more comfortable with who we are and accept that, and just try to be the best people that we can be, basically.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely agree with that. It's really all about authenticity. Like, if you in your mind, if you know, like, that's your authentic self, like, you just radiate that. Either people are going to hate you or love you, and that's when you know you're really in your real truth, you know?
Right.
And that's fine, because that's life, you know? It's not always going to be like, okay, let me be, like you said, two personalities, and like I'm feeling like I have to be this when I'm here and that when I'm there. That's such a struggle. Who wants to live like that? That's not freedom, like you said, you know?
Right.
I definitely want to give you a chance to shout out your movement, where people can find you, and how people can support you.
Awesome. I'm a part of an organization called the Black Awakening Movement. That's just one of the things I do. I primarily do my social activism through my spoken word, but I also believe that, you know, when we're working against racism, that we should be organized. So I am a part of this organization, and you can find it online. The website is blackawakeningmovement.com. We're also on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and also Meetup, and those are all under the name Black Awakening Movement. We hold open discussions via phone conference every Thursday, so you can find out more information about that on the website. And that's every Thursday at 7 o'clock Eastern Time. And we just talk about things that relate to Black people, and, you know, what we can do to empower ourselves, to uplift ourselves, and also to increase our own understanding and awareness. The organization works on providing information and handouts. And also, if you want just to get more information about racism and learning more, the website is a great place to go. There's a list of books, videos, lectures, and just things that will help you give you more information. And we also post stuff on social media as well. So again, that's Black Awakening Movement. As a spoken word artist, you can find my spoken word work online under the name Rhonda Sekhmet Ra. Rhonda, R-H-O-N-D-A. Sekhmet is spelled S-E-K-H-N-E-T. And then Ra is R-A. And also, if you type in Rhonda spoken word into Google, most of my stuff should come up. Also, I'm working right now to create a spoken word album so that I can just get my message out to more people and just spread as many positive and empowering, knowledge-seeking messages as possible. So if you're interested in helping with that at all, I also have a GoFundMe, which you can go to GoFundMe, and it's under Rhonda Speaks. I'm also on Facebook and Instagram, and that's under Rhonda Sekhmet Ra, and under Facebook under Rhonda Speaks. So please, if you're interested in any of my words and seeing more of my poetry, please look for me there. So I thank you so much for having me on this show and doing the podcast. I really enjoyed it, and, you know, I love talking about these things and sharing things like that with people, so I really appreciate it.
Yeah, definitely. If there's anything in the future that you ever feel like you want to talk about, any news event or something like that that comes up that you're promoting or anything like that, feel free to reach back out.
Okay.
This is Okay, Let's Be Real, the show where you show what you know, created to educate, motivate, and inspire. Real people, real conversations, real truth.